All right, y'all. What a video I have for y'all today. Okay, I have a clip from the Anti-Hero podcast featuring Kurt Mitchell, who is a retired Special Forces Green Beret, amongst many other things. And one of those is he worked for the UAP Task Force, right? The same task force that Jay Stratton led, David Grush was a part of, that his investigation came out of, and so many other people who have come out saying that they work for this task force, right? Including people in James Fox's new documentary, The Program. Well, Kurt went on this podcast, the Anti-Hero podcast, with other veterans and made some claims that I think you're going to find interesting. But first, let me give a shout out to the average Chris on Twitter for making me aware of this post. More on that in a moment. Here's the clip.
I was on something called the UAP Task Force, and so I'll tell you, you may know this, but
and again, what is UAP?
Oh, I'm sorry. Unidentified aerial phenomena.
Okay.
Just another word for unidentified flying object.
Yeah.
The aerial phenomena, because it doesn't have to be flying necessarily. But the bottom line is, during my last few years well, first I'll start with this. Especially in the intel community, almost everyone who gets a TS clearance, once they have access to the system stuff,
they go straight for that.
They do. Look at their files. Yeah. And
what can I get into?
Yeah. So, but the bottom line is, the whole way I got in was because of my intelligence background. I'm very good at something called vetting. Vetting information. I mean, I'm very good at it. I can get to the root of anything. It's how I managed to get so much good information and pass it on during my time in. But
good to know that. We'll contract you for some future episodes.
Yeah. People do that.
We could use some help.
That's it's something I do for people.
Okay.
Vetting? You're on the right show.
But the bottom line is, that's why I was in there, and not the vetting from the scientific standpoint. There's scientists, engineers, and all these guys are in the task force, and they're looking at the various video sensor data. And
what year is this?
This was 2021, 2022.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I just retired last year in 2023, so I was in it the whole time up until retirement. Because it's like a side thing. It's not like your full-time job. You just get in there, you see what's going on, and you put your 2 cents worth in. But for me, it was more just the interest in it. Remember, scientific nerd kid, when I was in high school, astronomy was my thing. As a matter of fact, if I could have been an astronaut, that would have been great. So UFOs interested me. But the more time I spent in and watched the trends of how information is released, just like with the whole COVID thing, I started seeing signs that the UAP thing was being used more and more in what we call a covert influence. The way it was being put out, piecemeal information, it's what we call it doing a litmus test, just like with COVID, there's a phrase like safer together,
right?
All these things. So those are little tests that go out and hopefully they catch on like an earworm. And I started seeing the same thing with you. It was more of a testing of the waters. And, people were looking at videos and stuff which mean absolutely nothing. I'm just going to tell you right now, that the stuff you see, the way it's released, and then what I would see on the UAP Task Force stuff, where guys would look at something and say, okay, well, everybody else is just seeing the visual image. Well, they got multispectral analysis and doing things. And everything looked like it was kind of being developed as a hip pocket if we ever need 9/11 united the nation, right?
Yeah.
Do we ever need to unite people, or do we ever need to instill fear in people? It was towards that. There was no indicator of any alien life from what I saw. Okay?
Yeah.
I'm just saying that from my perspective. What I did see was a lot of prep for something that could be used as a tool for manipulation.
That's called a conspiracy.
Oh.
Turn truth.
Well, that's interesting, right? That is not something any other former, UAP task force member has said, to be honest with you. And that's scary if that's the truth, right? They're basically using these videos and terms and kind of creating this environment where they can punch it into society against the American public whenever they see fit, right? For manipulation, some sort of false flag event. He compared it to COVID. So depending on how you feel about how COVID went, that's not a good sign, right? Now, I will say it would be nice if someone else came out as well saying the same thing, a former member, because this is just one person. But I have to admit, this is quite intriguing. And I don't know what to think of it, to be honest with you. Right? What do you think? Tell me in the comments. Does this kind of just blow open the idea that the UAP Task Force was for anything but to be used against us? Because the whole idea is that this was to find, alien life and present that, right? This push for disclosure, right? And this worries me a little bit. Now, some people are going to say, well, he didn't have access to everything and he didn't. Well, but there's a lot of people in the UFO community who believe these other UAP Task Force members and what they say. Why would his word be any less? Because, again, like I said before, credit goes to the average Chris on Twitter, who is also a former, just a veteran, right? A former military member. I'm not sure exactly what he served in or whatever. I don't really know the guy, to be honest with you. I've never spoken with him. But this was an interesting find, right? And when you look at the background of Kurt, right, here, you can see he's not just anybody. Let me read his background. Retired Chief Warrant Officer, Green Beret. Served in the 7th, 11th, and 20th Special Forces Groups. Served with Lieutenant General, retired, John F. Mulholland, former Associate Director of Military Affairs at the CIA. Worked in clandestine services. UAPTF member from 2021 to 2023. Provided background intel vetting services during UAPTF contributions. So he's not just anybody. He quite literally is a Special Forces badass, right? And this podcast has a lot of ex-Special Forces on there, Navy SEALs. Tim Kennedy was one of their previous guests. So this is interesting. I have to admit, this is quite interesting, and it would be great to see some comments from people like Lou Elizondo, David Grush, Jay Stratton, right? Anyone else who worked on the UAPTF to find out what they think about this. And again, it would be nice to have someone else kind of come out and corroborate what this gentleman is saying. But let's be real, his background is impeccable, right? And he served our country. Props to all the veterans out there, of course. But I have to admit, this is disturbing if this is true, right? And to be fair, there's a lot of people who have thought this, right? So to have someone come out and just kind of say exactly, what it is. I mean, even admitting like any videos or whatever, it's just all bunk, right? But again, is this definitive? I wouldn't say it's definitive just for the case. It's just one person. Now, granted, this one person is, has amazing, impeccable credentials, but we've been here before, right? Other people have impeccable credentials, and you can't just believe them because of that, right? That's something I say on here all the time. Well, why would he lie, right? Well, if we're going to be fair, we'd have to say the same thing for Kurt here. But it is intriguing, and I thought y'all should be made aware of this. Now, will more people come out and sort of back this up? Potentially, now that this gets out, right? Let's see if more members of the UAPTF come out and say something. But again, definitely worth listening and hearing. Make up your own mind. And again, shout out to the average Chris for making me aware of this. All right, y'all. We'll see you guys on the next video. Remember, every day's a gift, y'all. Peace.
I live inside my own world of make-believe. Kids screaming in the cradles, profanities. I see the world through ice covered in ink and bleach. Cross out the ones who heard my cries and watched me weep.